Regardless of what your background is or who you sleep with, I mean, everybody thinks a rainbow is kind of awesome.
Are we rolling? Hell yeah, go.
All right. By the way, you probably know where these boots are from. So I just had my 20th wedding anniversary.
Oh,
and,
goodness, congrats.
Thank you. We went out to Aspen.
Yeah.
I'd never been to Aspen. And my wife loves the Real Housewives shows.
Yes.
And they did a big segment at Kimosabe, which is like wildly popular Western wear in Aspen. So I got these boots, and I have to give credit to them. They are absolutely phenomenal.
They look like
and
you've had them for 20 years.
They are not that old, but they are well worn. And what I'm going to say is, I bet no one has ever taken off Kimosabe boots to put on rainbow socks.
Wait, roll it up so we all see how much you love the
history.
rainbow flag.
Well, you know what?
That's what this is.
You know, one of my kids pointed this out, and I do think it's actually unfortunate that everybody likes rainbows.
I know, it's
But
been taken.
when you and I would have grown up, or most of the people that are over, under 40 would have grown up,
Yep.
certainly. But if the rainbow was not something that had been co-opted in any kind of political statement,
Exactly.
it was just like, hey, rainbow bright. I felt like I was in My Little Pony with this. But the idea was, sort of universal. Rainbows are awesome. And now my kids are telling me, they see a rainbow, they don't think about just kind of like how awesome it is. They immediately think, oh, LGBTQ plus on, because they have really just kind of taken away something that was super beautiful and not connected to anyone.
You're right.
And made people think of a political nature with it, which
Yeah.
is, kind of unfortunate, I think, for the metaphor, because regardless of what your background is or who you sleep with, I mean, everybody thinks a rainbow is kind of awesome.
Because it was a pot of gold at the end.
That's right.
It's a symbol after a rainstorm.
That's right.
I know, rainbows were always my favorite. And now I see purses or jewelry, and my daughter's always loved them. And she's like, we have gay family members, gay friends. It's not that, but it's like, okay, usually when you wear it now, it's, I am making a statement.
That's right.
And I think we should take it back.
I just think, in general, the idea, and this is kind of where we started overlapping in the first place, was it's good to have things that have nothing to do other than, hey, this is something we share as a group.
Yes.
Like sports, right?
Yeah.
Where you can go into a football stadium or a basketball arena, and it doesn't matter, what race, religion, ethnicity, sexuality. When your team wins, make a shot to win. I know you're an Indiana fan. I'm unfortunately a Tennessee Titans fan, and we're not far from their stadium right now, and they don't win very much right now.
Yep.
But
the new
I've been
stadium
in
is
there.
going to fix it all.
Well, I was
right?
there for the Music City Miracle, one of the
wow.
most iconic plays ever as a
Yep.
fan, and it just brings everybody together.
It does.
And I think we're getting back to that era. But one of the things that's, I think, particularly challenging about what we've gone through is suddenly everything became a statement of politics instead of just a statement of unity.
Yep.
And just even something fun and
Yeah.
celebratory. So I hope we're going back to that.
Yeah, I feel like we are. I have more hope now. Hope and change.
Yes.
I have more hope now than I don't even know how long, because I was never this concerned.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why I didn't feel the need to have so much hope, because it's like, we're America. We're going to be okay. But maybe this is dramatic, and if it is, I don't care. It's my feeling that it took 2020 being stolen. I've always been an election denier. Call me what you want.
Right.
2020 being stolen in order for us to get to the point to realize we cannot continue this anymore. And they came close. They did a beautiful job, as Democrats usually do, to find a way to get their way. But it took being on the brink of disaster for people to be like, okay, that red wave that we just saw, not in 2022, as expected, 2024, that's because we got to the brink. Because you couldn't say she or he in your elementary school classroom, right?
Yep.
Because of all the different reasons we got there. So I actually think it was a blessing in disguise that Donald Trump had not been president for the last 4 years.
I agree.
Yeah?
I saw you at the inaugural ball Monday, and it was fascinating to me. There was a DraftKings and a FanDuel lounge. They were two of the official presenting sponsors. Now, the Ohio State-Notre Dame game was going on,
Yes.
so I was looking for television, so
Exactly.
I saw that, and I went, and I appreciate the fact it makes sense that they would put the game on, and Sage, in 2021, FanDuel and DraftKings said I was too controversial to be a spokesperson for them because I was talking about voting for Trump in 2020 and because I said men who identify as women shouldn't be able to be women's champions. They said I was too controversial.
Goodness.
Fast forward 3 years, and suddenly they're showing up with pom-poms, basically, spending millions of dollars to sponsor Donald Trump's inauguration party in Washington, D.C. and put on Notre Dame, Ohio State. And they're just going to pretend that that whole era that you and I both lived through, where you weren't allowed to say, hey, I don't want to get a COVID shot.
Yeah.
Or you weren't allowed to say, hey, men shouldn't be able to compete in women's sports. They're just going to pretend none of that happened, and that they didn't try to extract significant consequences for people like you and me who spoke out. And I think it's important for everybody out there to understand that just because they're suddenly seeing the light, just because Facebook suddenly says, oh, we're not going to censor anymore, it's a consequence of the election.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe if Trump hadn't won the popular vote, that they would still be trying to work through the resistance. I think it's not just about winning. It's about winning in such a consequential fashion that they can't rig it,
Right.
that they can't try to finagle a win out of a loss, and that the whole nation has to understand that we're firmly repudiating a lot of what I think crazy left-wing orthodoxy has allowed to become embedded in our society.
Like I said, they've done a great job. They've always run better campaigns. They did absolutely the right thing with Joe Biden, I think, in many ways, just ignoring, because we'd been so stupid in the past to just accept everything else they said. Why wouldn't they?
Right.
So they, maybe not the right thing, but they got cocky enough to believe that it would continue, why not?
I think ironically enough, the woke era, I think, is a joke, but I do think a lot of people woke up on the opposite side. Because you're a parent, I'm a parent, you're super busy.
Yeah.
People are busy with work, and then, you get in your car and you got 5 different sporting events to get your kids to, and I think it became so all-encompassing that people couldn't ignore it anymore.
Yeah.
And I think COVID, kids not being in school, one, it was the wrong decision. But I think also parents suddenly became aware of some of the curriculums that their kids were being exposed to. You don't usually have a classroom camera, so you don't know on a day-to-day basis what your kids are experiencing necessarily. And I think a lot of people suddenly saw what their kids were doing, said, wait a minute, what's going on here? And ultimately, I think we've had a long war over, is America's history and our nation good or bad?
Right.
And there are a lot of people who believe it's evil and bad. And they were triumphant for a long time.
They were.
And they had all of the power. And I think many people out there said, wait a minute, we're being told a lot of things that aren't true. And you and I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. It wasn't perfect.
No.
But people tended to get along. And when you had political debates, it was over, hey, what should the corporate tax rate be?
Right.
And you might have an opinion, I might have an opinion, we end up with a result, but you didn't think that the other side was evil.
No.
And I like to think that almost like an adolescent goes through that period where you worry that you're losing them and they're a little bit emotional and everything else, and then ideally they age through it and they become more rational and grow up. I feel like in many ways we had an adolescent era because of social media, and now people are coming into their 20s and they're starting to be more fully formed adults, if that makes sense.
Well, you look at how the vote went with certain demographics, and for Donald Trump and Republicans to win that 18 to 24, to win with Hispanics, the black vote, more black people voted, and I hate to say the black vote, but more black people voted for a Republican for the first time in more than 50 years. This number, 76, 78%,
This was the least racially divisive election since 1964.
Insane.
60 years.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people, to your point, white, black, Asian, and Hispanic, are recognizing, one, everybody of all races has way more in common than we want to, than the media often wants to portray. And what do most people want? Their kids to do better than they did.
Yeah.
Like, that's what unites us all, right? If you're a parent, you want your kids to grow up, be more successful. You want your grandkids to grow up, be more successful. And when you're being told, hey, the country is awful, and kids are being taught, hey, you could never aspire to be something more than you are, God, it's ultimately a self-fulfilling and self-defeating prophecy. And it's also the antithesis of everything that America represents, which is we're going to be better this generation coming than we were in the one in the past. And optimism ultimately, I think, wins. This is why I'm so excited as I'm talking to you today. I just feel like I've had, I get chills thinking about election night and the consequences.
I know.
Not just for now, but for going forward.
I was emotional that night in Palm Beach, night of the election, and I was telling you earlier, I was in Palm Beach at the convention center.
Oh, at the big party there.
The big party there, and it's crazy because the night before, a couple hours before, I mean, I didn't sleep for a long time.
Yeah.
So worth it. But I was actually on Trump Force One.
Oh, that's kind of a big deal.
Kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
I did his town hall in Lancaster sometime in October and had a day on the plane there to Sunday Night Football with the Jets Steelers.
Yep.
And that was insane. I'll never forget it. But then the Monday night before the election, I was I'd been on the ground with Tulsi Gabbard doing hurricane, just talking to victims in Buncombe County,
I saw a lot of
North
that.
Carolina.
You guys did a good job. I went in there too and saw it, and the fact that that's still not being talked about enough.
It was gone after a week, And I actually went and just on my own dime went up to west coast of Florida, Pinellas County, to just see the damage and to talk about how we can continue to help. Samaritan's Purse will do it with the fires as well now. But it was an honor to be with Tulsi and Danica Patrick and on the ground to see it, to feel it. And then we had a nice little friend of Tulsi's that got us on his G550 to Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
We did the rally there with Donald Trump. Danica and I were supposed to speak there. Of course, Tulsi did. And then, Secret Service stuff took over. I was like, oh, that was my one time.
Yeah.
And then Trump Force One from there to Grand Rapids
Yep.
for the last rally of the campaign.
That was so awesome.
Which started at like 12:45 a.m.
I was still up watching when he walked out. Yeah, I stayed up because I was so fired up for the night, just for the election day to get there.
We walked in, and I'm like, it is well past midnight, and you have little kids that have been waiting there for hours. And he spoke for about an hour and 5 minutes. We left the arena in Grand Rapids at, what time was it, 12:45? 2:05 a.m. Got to the airport, wheels up at 2:40 a.m., and then the whole plane ride down to Palm Beach on the morning of the election, he's got the iPad. You know how he is as a DJ. And the music that he was playing at 100,000 decibels, so nobody could sleep
on the whole plane.
Oh my gosh, it was and I will tell you, Clay, I sat there and I wanted to sleep, but then I didn't. I'm not sleeping through this. And I took a moment and I got a little choked up.
Yeah.
Because I thought, how the hell am I on this plane sitting across from this person at this moment in history? And what a blessing from God that he allowed this to happen. That's the way I look at it, because it has changed my life just to have the freedom to speak up. And I thought, what if I'd stayed quiet at ESPN because it was safer and a lot more affordable, cheaper to stay quiet, so many different things. And I think about that with you too.
Yeah.
Like, you chose to make a turn, and you've been public about being a Democrat, liberal forever.
Yeah.
Until 2020? Or was
it really started, so in 2000, so I'm 45. In 2008 and 2012, I was an Obama voter.
Yeah.
2016, I started to really kind of pay attention to the arguments that Trump was making. And I'll tell you one that immediately stood out to me. He said, hey, we should have never done the Iraq War. And we spent trillions of dollars. We made a poor decision there. And no Republican had ever said that before.
Yeah.
And it was 100% right. I think, unfortunately, George W. Bush and Dick Cheney made the wrong decision on going into Iraq, the money we spent, the lives we lost. And Trump was willing to challenge conventional orthodoxy in a way that nobody else was. And I remember watching that debate on Fox News that Megyn Kelly hosted, which was just kind of a crazy show.
Yes.
And thinking, boy, I know that Trump is getting a lot of criticism, but much of what he's saying, when you actually cut through the hyperbole and the sort of the histrionics that surround the coverage of it, I don't think is wrong.
I know.
And so that was like my antennas going up. And meanwhile, Hillary Clinton, here's the thing. I don't want somebody's argument to be, you should vote for me because of something I don't control, right? And so I felt like to Hillary, it was, hey, I want to shatter that glass ceiling. You should vote for me because I'm a woman.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say I wouldn't vote for somebody because of their race or gender, but you can't lead with, I should be elected because of something that I didn't choose.
That's a great point. I've never thought of it that way.
And so it seems to me a lazy argument. Like I will say, and once you notice it, you can't look away from it. Whenever somebody starts one of their arguments by saying, as a woman, as a transgender person, as a gay, LGBT of color, whatever identifier you want to give, that's fine, but it makes me trust your opinion less because you're trying to tell me why I should pay more attention to you based on a characteristic you didn't choose. Like, I don't choose to be a white guy, right? So if I say, as a white guy, I believe you should just eliminate all of that. It reminds me of back in the day, the divine right of kings. They would say, hey, because I'm the third Earl of Shrewsbury, divine right of this, like I believe, make your argument.
Yeah.
And I trust you or anybody else out there to make an argument. I'll listen to it. But the identity that you bring to the table, which you didn't choose, you don't choose your race, you don't choose your gender. I think to a large extent, you don't choose your sexuality, right? My personal opinion. Those things to me are the least interesting part of you.
Yes.
The choices that you yourself make are far more interesting. So my point on that was I started to say, I kind of feel like I'm being manipulated based on identity from the Democrat Party. I think it started in 2012 because if you go back to 2008, Obama's entire campaign was America's so amazing that I can get elected president.
Yes.
Right? And that was compelling to me. Yeah, you're a single kid, mixed race, like you can rise to the office of presidency. That fulfills the dream of American optimism. By 2012, it was, hey, it's important to re-elect a black guy. I felt like that was the subtext of much of that campaign. He leaned into identity politics to win. By 2016, and I like Obama in terms of his personal magnetism and charisma, Hillary doesn't have either of those things. And so by 2016, it was like she had the cudgel and she was like, I'm woman, we have to break the glass ceiling.
Yes.
And so I voted libertarian that year. So I voted like, I was like, I don't really like either of these. I don't know whether to trust Trump. And then I watched the Trump era and I was like, yeah, he's right on a lot of this. And he's making choices that are rational and good. And by 2020, COVID, in conjunction with having seen Trump, I was all aboard the Trump train for 2020.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
But the thing is you're, and most people don't know that you're an attorney.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, when's the last time you practiced?
I'm still licensed in multiple jurisdictions. But the last, I mean, I'll look at contracts and things like that, but I haven't been in a courtroom in well over a decade.
Okay.
Maybe 15
But
years.
the way you think, the way you communicate, the way you like break things down and analyze them and make it more clear. That's why I watch you every day. Because I'm like, yes, that's what I was trying to say, but I failed because I can't say it like Clay Travis. But like you have eloquently broken down your process. This isn't just, I'm going to jump on the Trump train just because, or because Hillary's a pig, like whatever.
Yeah.
It was policy. First and foremost, you're a businessman.
Yep.
You're a really damn good businessman. I could take some advice from you.
Yeah. And
then to see that the proof is in the pudding. It wasn't just an overnight decision. There's a part of me, Clay, and I don't know how you feel about this, and I kind of kid, but now I'm like, that flight from DC back to Nashville yesterday, like there was a lot of MAGA hats, And everybody's got their
we were on the same plane.
On the same flight, Southwest Airlines, I still love it. Like everybody's got the scarves and the gear, and and I love it. And I'm also like, where have you been?
Yeah.
It's actually not that much different than it was in 2016, what he's saying and doing. In some aspects, yes, but the same principles stand. And so part of me is like, damn it. Like I don't know, life would have been a lot different for many people had others not been afraid to speak up, but I understand why too.
Totally, and I'll give you an example on the way I think. So 65 million people voted for Trump in 2016. By 2024, 77 million people did. So he added 12 million voters. I always think that for everything I do, I'm trying almost like a trial attorney for the background of the law to just make a case to the jury. The American public is the jury. And I think if I marshal the facts correctly, I spend a lot of time thinking about these things and just trying to be rational in a way that a regular juror could understand it. See, my grandfather dropped out of school in 8th grade that I'm named after. and worked in a coal mine in Kentucky, right? Worked at DuPont just up the road. We're in Nashville right now, in Old Hickory, Tennessee for his entire career. Super smart guy, had a fraction of the opportunity that I did, right? We were talking about wanting to give more opportunity to more kids, and our kids and grandkids to have more opportunity. I think Trump's going to provide that, right?
I do too.
And one of the big things that I lose sleep over now, to the extent that I worry, is it makes me feel sick to my stomach that there's tremendous opportunity out there, but that lots of kids don't have the opportunity to fulfill their potential, their God-given potential, right? Because we do a poor job of understanding and developing that potential.
Yeah.
And from a sports perspective, the Michael Orr story, right? The
Yeah.
Blind Side, which read the book. The movie's great, but read the
book's
book. The book really just talks about the unrealized potential of so many people on the proverbial blind side
Yeah.
of our country, right? And so how do you unlock that? You provide opportunity, you provide economic opportunities that otherwise wouldn't exist, and you unleash the individual power of so many Americans. And
Yeah.
to me, what Democrats now do is try to say, well, collectively, we want to do this. I want everybody to be Elon Musk, right? I want my kids to grow up and be brilliant individual talents. And the more individual talent we unleash, the better the economy grows, the further progress we make, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, everybody. And I think so many people are starting to see that, because what Democrats ultimately sell is a very negative version of life, because it's you can't
Yeah.
because of your race or your sex or your religion or your state or your socioeconomic status. You can't. And I think if you tell people all the time, you can't do that, a lot of people believe it.
Yeah.
And if you tell them on the flip side,
younger,
hey,
yeah.
you can achieve truly remarkable things, then a lot of them will start to believe it. And I think that's the message we have to send. And I think right now, Republicans send it. Now, here's what makes me nervous. You were talking about people. I am still, because I feel like I've been betrayed by the Democrat Party, I'm hesitant to even almost say I'm a full-fledged Republican, because my concern is in 20 years, Republicans might go crazy.
100%.
Right? I like where they are right now, but in 2048, if you told me, hey, after a bunch of years of winning elections, they've betrayed their principles now, I would rather stay committed to principle over party, for lack of a better way to describe it.
But that's, my mom always said this, right? Okay, I'm going to botch it, but when you're young and you're a Republican, you don't have a heart. When you're
Yes.
old, you're a Democrat, you don't have a mind. I think that it applies to today for sure.
Yep.
I think it's come back around, like, and then some. But the Democrat, people don't also know history, right? And
Yeah.
Martin Luther King was actually a Republican, and was a Republican a little bit different then, maybe, but
Yeah.
fine. But if you are just looking at sheer numbers and facts, not feelings, facts,
Yep.
and what these big cities, how they have been run,
Totally.
Democrat run for 50, 60 plus years, how do they look?
Yep.
How's that going?
That's right.
So, fine, the feelings, I get it. I'm just over it.
Yeah.
Just block that out and look at the facts. Look at your cities at the stoplights, under the bridge, on the main drags, and
Yep.
Michigan Avenue, a
Yep.
once vibrant, beautiful area of downtown Chicago. That's why President Trump has talked about it and what he's going to do, one of the very first things, right?
Yes.
So maybe by the time this airs, he already
Yeah.
will have, I don't know. So that's why I've been frustrated, because people are not using their brain to look at what's in front of them. It doesn't mean you got to like them either. I saw Stephen A. the other day on Dave Rubin's show, and I
Yeah.
love Dave Rubin and I love Stephen A. Smith, but I saw him and he said at the end of the day, I didn't vote for Trump because I just can't stand some of the stuff he does and his tweeting and what he says, and it's just not presidential. I'm like, no shit. Like, we all know that. Get over it.
Yeah.
It's not about that. It is about what is best for this country from an economic standpoint. And I know you're about to make $20 million a year, and so maybe you don't think about that as much, although I know that he does because of where he came from, and he just
Yep.
went making himself a Florida resident all of a sudden. He's smart. He's getting
Yes.
there. But, like, why are people so caught up in the feelings?
I think because Democrats have convinced them that they should be. And I think this ties in with, how do we break? Like, I spend a lot of time thinking about how do we break? So let's go back in time. 2008, Barack Obama gets elected. Now, we're in a messy economic situation, but there was a landslide for Obama in 2008, right? There's a great deal of optimism. And I think what happened was, in addition to identity politics rising, it wasn't just identity politics, it was social media. And I think social media, it's been good for my career on an individual basis, right? Because it's allowed me to make arguments to a larger audience. One of the reasons we met, right?
Yeah, it is.
But I also think that so much of it is performative that everyone all of a sudden thinks that they have a brand.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are afraid of being isolated. We're very tribal people. People want to be surrounded by people that agree with them and everything else. And I think a lot of social media was performative BS.
Yeah, I agree.
And I sit back and I look and take away the politics. I saw a stat the other day, 30% of teenage girls have thought about killing themselves in the last year.
Good God.
Just think about that, where we are. Almost 1 in 3 teenage girls. Why is that? I think it's because they're active on Instagram and they go on and there's lots of super beautiful airbrushed women who are very popular, and they look at it and they think to themselves, I don't look like that.
Yeah.
And they feel bad.
Yes.
Or they see that the prettiest girl in their grade just had an amazing vacation, or she just got a new car, and they don't have that. And so comparison, I really think, is oftentimes the thief of joy, because if you sit around comparing yourself to others who are putting forth their best feeling or their best artificial version of their reality. And so I think it allowed emotion to triumph. Social media is not, to a large extent, a logical medium. It's a place where something that provokes emotion goes viral.
Right.
And so the George Floyd video, as an example, on a really like systemic level, I think it drove the country emotionally insane, the reaction to that video. And small measures of that are occurring everywhere at all times. And so what I like to say is, whatever you think, there's a video that will tell you that whatever you think is real. It's anecdotal. It's maybe not representative of what the world as a whole is like, but there is something out there to support your argument. And they realize that with their algorithms and everything else, emotion wins, and they constantly reinforce emotion. I think what's happening now is a lot of people have realized that they've been manipulated.
Yes, they see it now.
They're more conscious of it.
Yeah.
And that's what I would say is we had the wokening, where like America lost its mind for a decade. I would say we have the great unwokening that is underway right now. And I think we're going to come through that, I'm hopeful, into a place where we're more rational. That's my big picture analysis. I hope I'm right. I could be wrong.
I pray that you're right. And I think when you go back to 2008, one of the things I thought that they did best was to get to the correct demographic on social media, on Facebook. If you recall, Obama, I don't know if they were Facebook Live, whatever they were called back then, he would do them. And he looked the part and handsome and diverse and all those things, and it worked. I believe that we, aside from now the last couple of years, and frankly since Trump got elected or decided he was going to run in 2015, the golden escalator.
The day that started,
Yeah, because that's when people just went nuts and lost it. But otherwise, we had been kind of getting there with Obama. It was a very divisive time, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I look back at how we handled a couple of things, the Michael Brown incident in Missouri, and there was some stoking of those racial flames that were unnecessary. I think a lot of people took advantage of things during that time, and it continued all the way through, very recently we're at the DEI hires. And you look at what happened at my former network at ESPN since COVID, and George Floyd happened at the same time. The number of people who took full advantage of that situation, we don't need to name names, but it's disappointing. I guess that's all it is. But water under the bridge. Never forget, though, I think that's where we can get in trouble. We could end up right back here.
I think this is important, too. You and I and a lot of people like us who spoke out, the easiest way to continue to make money was to pretend that we believe things we did not.
Correct.
Because it would have kept us employed. It would have protected us. You know this. I think a lot of people don't realize that. There's a lot of performative BS. And even some of the people who calculatedly made the decision to profit off of it, I don't even think they buy into it. Now,
most of them don't, I agree.
That's right.
CEOs, everything.
That's right. I mean, and honestly, if you are a CEO and you're making $10 million a year, a lot of those guys decided they would send out the email and they would put up a picture of themselves, like with a BLM slogan or whatever it was back in the day, because they were following whatever the herd did, and that protected them even if they didn't believe it. And so I'm cautiously optimistic on the ESPN front because of a couple of things. One, they totally blew it when they missed the national anthem and the moment of silence.
They didn't miss it.
So I
They
think
chose to not air it. It wasn't a mistake.
now they claim that it was a mistake.
But
You have done television for a long time. You know how scripted television is and everything else. But I think what it represented, because I wrote a piece and I directly addressed Bob Iger, Jimmy Pitaro, Burke Magnus in my piece. I think what they recognized was, whether they'll say it or not, they said it was an error, but I think sometimes the errors you make reflect the culture that you have built.
yes,
Right? So even if we're being generous to them and we're saying, okay, this was just a huge error, which I doubt, even if we're being generous, the culture that you created, nobody raised a hand
Yeah.
in the hours before then and said, hey guys, there was a terror attack on Bourbon Street yesterday. We're honoring the 14 dead people. 60,000 people have shown up the next day to watch this game. This is a really important part. Leave aside who's going to win the game. What those people are doing and how they respond to the national anthem and the moment of silence is the story of the game.
it is.
And we have to be there. And when the culture failed to present that to the public, I look now, Sage, Monday during the national title game, they aired a Donald Trump message during halftime.
Insanity.
Reese Davis asked directly in an interview one of the players about how the religious faith of the team had impacted the outcome. Not a player telling them that, specifically targeted. They've aired a prayer before one of the NFL playoff games, which
made me laugh because that's just like over the top, not necessary, and I don't think they should do that.
But I think they are now, the pendulum has swung to such an extent that I think they looked at the culture. Sometimes it takes really screwing up. I always say, like, you can recognize that somebody might have an alcohol or a drug problem. You can intervene and sit down, and your friends and family can say, hey, you need to change some of the life choices you're making. Until you see it, none of that's going to work.
You're right.
It's like they saw it with clear eyes. And maybe they had suspicion that the culture had deteriorated at that point. But the analogy I really think I shook them with was George W. Bush, Game 3,
Yes.
2001 World Series
Yep.
after the 9/11 terror attack.
First pitch.
Killed it.
Yeah.
And it was a moment, Yankee Stadium, most of those guys and gals in that stadium did not vote George W. Bush.
Yeah.
But it was such a uniquely unifying American moment.
It
ESPN
was.
made a 30 for 30 about that pitch, called First Pitch.
Yes.
And so that came out, I went back and looked, 2015. So in the space of 9 years, ESPN went from making a documentary, which is 100% justified, about that pitch, to not covering a moment of silence after a terror attack. And I think that was like a holy crap moment for the ESPN executives. And I'd like to think that they are readjusting and recalibrating their decision-making going forward as a result.
I would hope so, and I think so, and it does feel that way. I think the prayer was over the top again.
Yeah.
I think the national anthem is a no-brainer.
Yep.
And especially at events of this magnitude. Like once you're in bowl season, every single time. The reason why I do think it was an intentional decision and not a mistake is because, as you recall, the SEC network
Oh, yeah.
did it perfectly. They ran all of it with Marty Smith as their host.
Yep.
Who owns SEC Network? ESPN.
Yep.
Like,
And
sorry.
I think, by the way, that goes to culture. Because
That's the
network,
SEC, the
that's
Southeast Conference. But fine, culture. That said,
in a positive way with
it
the
was
SEC
not,
network, though, because I think the culture that they've created because of Greg Sankey and the commissioner is like, hey, America's good, and we love college football, and
Yes.
we celebrate everything. And I give credit. Marty Smith was on the air. Also, another individual who's from New Orleans, who I wish I was remembering his name right now.
I forgot who he was with, but Marty did it, and Marty rocked it, and Marty has his North Carolina twang, right? But at the end of the day, college football
Yep.
is overall a conservative fan base
Yep.
for the most part because of where the power usually lies. So they know that on that game, in particular the Sugar Bowl, in the city a mile from where
Yep.
these people were murdered. So fine, they did it. If they try to correct themselves, great. I think there's just been so much damage that at what point do we trust that they have this isn't even about my feelings or
Yeah.
yours or anyone else's. This is common business sense.
Yep.
What did Michael Jordan say? Republicans buy sneakers too.
Title of one of my books.
100%.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes.
Like it's so basic. And as businessmen and women, but mainly men who run Disney with Bob Iger, you know better. Then again, and I said it because of my situation. I mean, Bob Iger almost ran for president in 2020.
Yep.
He has been outspoken as hell about Trump, and we all know where he stands. My thing is, whether it's that, whether it's Bud Light, look at Dana White. He says he's not political. What he is he's loyal, and he sees how how things have affected his business. Sports fans, don't we want all of them?
Yeah. 100%.
Don't we want all of them?
Especially when you're moving, Sage, to a streaming service.
Yeah.
Because instead of just having a cable satellite subscription where you get every channel and you don't make, other than like an HBO, most of the time you're not making a choice, right? It's part of the cable bundle. Now you have to make a conscious choice. I want ESPN flagship or whatever they're going to call it on a streaming service. The business doesn't work if only Democrats subscribe to ESPN.
Exactly, especially right now. Did you see the red wave? Did you see that map?
That's right. And so I think, again, the culture thing, the SEC, I know because I know those guys well, they said, look, we do sports here. Like, we're not going to give you strong takes on the Florida so-called don't say gay bill. We're not going to do moments of silence. We're not going to do any of that. And so I do think it was culture at the SEC network, even though ESPN runs both. The culture of the SEC network is, hey, we respect our audience.
Yes.
We know what our audience likes. And somebody raised their hand. Maybe it was Marty Smith. Maybe it was other people in the production truck. And they're like, we're going to be here. To me, that's an evidence to your argument of this was intentional, because it's surely interesting that SEC network managed to cover it all and ESPN managed to cover it none.
Nothing. And to me, yeah, again, zero doubt in my mind based on what I know that place to be. And this is an even bigger scale. This isn't SEC. This is the country for a huge, huge game. This is when you go hard knowing what your fan base is.
Well, and for people who don't know television, you've hosted some of the biggest sporting events on the planet and the peripheral programming, shoulder programming around it. Like, it is minute by minute scripted in super detail about what the topics are going to be, what the packages, the video that's going to be running. Like, you have got it all down to a science because of commercial breaks and
on ESPN and ABC, whether it's the NBA Finals with 30 million people watching or the Masters or whatever it might be. I hosted the Miss America pageant. Like, every single thing is so scripted. Sometimes it's annoying how scripted it is. But at that level, the communication that goes on between the broadcast teams, the bosses, the executives, the commissioners, the people who run the stadium, like, it's next level. So at the end of the day, we can all improve.
Yes.
We can all evolve.
Yes.
I hope that there hasn't been too much damage done, because despite my feelings for how my situation ended, I loved every minute there, Clay.
Yeah.
As far as doing my job. The periphery, not always.
Yeah.
But I loved it. I love what it represents, because sports is the ultimate unifier.
Yes.
That's why I wanted to be a sportscaster.
Yep.
Is because it's the one thing you can do where everybody of all those different ethnicities and socioeconomic status and religions and sexuality, like, you're the Tennessee Titans on Sundays. What's happening? You guys are all on the same damn team.
That's right.
And it feels good. And that is what I want our kids to see and to feel. And right after 9/11 with George Bush, it's a beautiful thing. The Olympics.
Yes.
I'm still one of those that loves the Olympics.
I love the Olympics too.
That's right. You do too. I'm so grateful that you have always, even when a couple times I'm like, oh God, Clay, you're like Donald Trump. I'm like, Clay, what? Why? For instance, one of the first times when I wrote you, when I was like, he might think I'm out of line for saying this, but I just loved you from a distance for about everything and your strength. And I told you, you taught me a lot. Is your boobs moment on CNN. And I was like, Clay, why? Remind people, because that was intentional.
Yeah, 2017, I was actually on CNN. I was defending Jamel Hill, ironically.
Good God.
Because she had been suspended for what she said off the air. And I had previously written on Twitter. I had previously written that ESPN made the wrong decision on Kurt Schilling because he had gone on Facebook and shared his personal political opinions on the transgender bathroom situation, if I remember correctly. And ESPN suspended him from Baseball Tonight.
Yep.
And my argument has always been, hey, if Curt Schilling had started off Baseball Tonight by saying, hey, I know that, David Wells just had a perfect game, but I really want to talk to you guys about my opinion on the transgender bathroom bill, I would be like, ESPN should suspend him.
Yes.
Right? Like, he's using their airwaves. People have tuned in to watch him talk about baseball, and instead they get a rant about what Curt Schilling thinks about transgender bathrooms. And similarly, if Jamel Hill on a SportsCenter show had started off SportsCenter by saying, I know we got a big game tonight, but I got to just tell you guys about what Donald Trump just tweeted that has nothing to do with sports because it's unacceptable to me, I'd be like, she should be suspended. But they also have a right to their opinions outside of whatever their job is. And I just want, you should have a policy in place that allows in some way for people who have different opinions to be treated as to have a private life. Like, I hate the idea, and this was my argument, this is like 7 or 8 years ago, I was ahead of the curve on this. I hate the idea, take it away from ESPN. I hate the idea that Joyce in random accounting department at random company in America could have gone on her personal Facebook page and said something that got her fired at her job, right? If she's good at her job, I don't think we should be pouring through people's social media feeds to try to find reasons in their private life why they shouldn't be able to have a public opinion. I think that's toxic. I think it actually breeds a lack of honesty because everybody's trying to be performative on social media instead of saying what they really think. Okay, so I was making the argument, and if you say, as I had said for some time, for several years before, I'm a First Amendment absolutist, a lot of people don't understand what that means.
Yeah.
Right? And so you have to say it in a way that makes people like, it's like a record scratch moment. Like, wait, what did he just say? Like, you have to hit them with, hey, something that manages to catch. If I'd said First Amendment absolutist in that conversation, nobody would have noticed.
Correct.
It would have been clipped, like disappears. But I've been saying on my radio show for a while, there's only 2 things that have never let me down, the First Amendment and boobs. And it's funny because people who claim to be First Amendment, absolutists, oftentimes don't actually follow through.
Yeah.
Right? So I combine those 2 things in kind of a funny way that's a little bit of a record scratch to get people's attention. When I said it on CNN, I said it because I say it on my radio show, but I thought they might react, right?
The anchor,
Brooke Baldwin.
Brooke Baldwin was like, whoa.
Excuse me, as a woman, like,
Yes.
right? And my thing is, when I say something publicly, it's intentional, right? And I'm never going to apologize. And so she wanted me to apologize on air for what I had said. And instead, I doubled and tripled down and continued. And as a result, I think we have since won that battle to a large extent. But I think it was important to get it in front of people's faces. That was the #1 Facebook story that day, right? Like, #1 Facebook story is a huge deal,
Wow.
right? That was the #1 trending topic on Twitter for the entire day. And a lot of people that otherwise would not have seen that argument suddenly saw it. And so I think, and the funniest thing about that to me was Hugh Hefner died like 2 weeks later. Not that he died, but I wish he was still alive. I'm anti-death. But they, I wish we were all immortal.
Some of us.
Yes, well, yes, good point. But they covered him as a hero. And I'm not sure there's ever been a more First Amendment and boobs guy than the guy who founded Playboy magazine, right?
Exactly.
And so I just thought that was ironic. And they were trying to brand me as a diehard Trump supporter and like, this is what happens in Donald Trump's America. But it was also fundamentally artificial. Like, are you telling me that women don't know that men are attracted to female cleavage?
Correct.
You know, I mean, come on, let's be honest.
Correct.
And so it was sort of that performative thing. And the other thing people forget is there was another guy on the air with me.
Yeah.
And he was like, said he was super offended. And by the way, this thing continues to go viral. If you haven't seen it, look it up. Like, it's one of the most viral clips out there, and it cycles through it's been 7 years now, but kids keep finding it as they get older. But the guy on there was like, I can't believe you would say this. And it turned out that he had an entire social media profile talking about how much he liked asses. So it was
Stop.
absolutely hysterical because then
that.
people caught him.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, it was just like him pretending to be something that he wasn't.
Yes. And then making you like.
I think what people want, whether they agree or disagree with you, is to trust that you believe what you're telling them.
Yes.
That's what people are looking for.
Well, we know that you believe it.
I do.
With both of those topics.
Yes.
Yes. And two things. With that, I only wrote you because I was like, it was a different time. And I was like, oh gosh, I don't want him to go away because of what can happen. And I hadn't been canceled yet. I was like, no, we need you. So I was almost like protective, even though it wasn't like my right, but that's just how I felt about you. And you were like, yeah, thanks a lot. I get it. Whatever. Peace out. And I respected it though. For the record, Jemele Hill was not suspended because of her comments about Donald Trump. She was suspended because of what she said after she was talked to about that. Oh, that's
correct.
And that was about the NFL.
She encouraged people to boycott the NFL, which is.
And then the network for which you are working
spends $1 billion a year for the NFL. Yes, that's what she.
That was what she got suspended for, and probably not even ESPN's choice per se. That was Goodell and the league being like, really? Now you're going to do this?
You're encouraging your employers. Yeah, that's a good point.
And along with that, even if it had been the Trump thing, we were told explicitly, you can't tweet politics.
Yeah.
And so I remember, and I have not told this story before, gosh, I remember right after she got suspended, being up in John Skipper's office. Remember John Skipper, the old ESPN president who went bye-bye because of cocaine and extramarital, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It was quite a day at ESPN when that happened. And I had a previously planned meeting up in his office because I had just returned to Bristol after being taken off NBA and all these crazy things. And I went up to his office and he's like, what do you think I should do? And I'm like, you're asking me what I think you should do about Jemele Hill? And Jemele and I were still friendly at the time, I think. Yeah. And he's like, and I go, here's the thing. You told us we can't tweet about that stuff.
Yep.
And if that's the case, if we can, then let us know, because I got some things to say. But if not, then you need to be consistent with this.
Right.
He goes, well, two things. Number one, about Donald Trump, she's right. And I go, wow.
He's a white supremacist, according to John Skipper.
Yes, that's what Jemele had written. And he goes, well, she's right. I agree with her. And I go, I completely disagree. As a woman of color, a woman of color, I got to double dip there, you know? And I said, okay, that's your opinion. But as the executive, the CEO, the president of this network, your opinion shouldn't matter.
Right.
Like,
you have to stand for the principle over.
Well, first of all, don't you want all sports fans watching? When you choose to allow an employee or anyone to divide, that's bad business, and I'm no businesswoman, right? Number one. Number two, I was just blown away that he's like, well, she's right.
I never knew that. It
well,
doesn't surprise me.
No one ever knew this. I've not told the story.
But I mean, it makes sense, right? Like
he was very, very, very left of left.
Right.
Probably still is, just like Bob Iger.
Yeah.
But I remember being shocked. At least he admitted to me. But number two, I said, you told us this is the rule.
Yeah.
I'm a parent of 3. If I tell my kids this is the rule, and then I allow them to break it, one of them to break it, you're damn right. The other 2 are going to be like, well, what do you mean? Quinn didn't finish her broccoli. I'm not going to finish it either. You can't make me.
Yep.
So I said, you got to be consistent for the rest of us. I am a rule follower.
Yeah.
To a fault. Not anymore.
Yeah.
I was then.
Right.
And that was the conversation that we had in his office. It was like September 17th, whenever that was, 2017.
Yep.
And he didn't suspend her. This is only after the Trump thing.
Yep.
And then she did the NFL thing. And then the third reason he said he didn't suspend her is because he said, I'm going to have Al Sharpton and everybody marching outside these gates, and I do not need that right now. That
is a rational choice, potentially. But you're right. I was arguing they should rehire Curt Schilling if they're not going to treat like situations in a like manner. And he did not. He fired Curt Schilling, probably because he disagreed with what Curt Schilling
100%.
said. And he didn't do anything to Jemele because as you just pointed out, he agreed.
He literally said, she's right.
Let me tell you this, too. You'll appreciate that. That day, it was a Friday. I don't remember the exact date. But I've been working constantly. was about to be the weekend, and we were going to take the kids out for pizza. I've got the 3 boys, and so they were very young, but I was like, I've been working a ton. I told my wife, I just have to do one more interview. I'm going to do CNN, and then as soon as I get done with this, we're done. We're going to take the boys out for pizza. I will say this, for anyone out there, as soon as I finished the interview, my wife texted me, one of the first texts I got from the house. For all the men out there watching, if you are getting texted by your wife inside of the house, it's generally not a sign of positivity, right? She texted, do I need to put the house on the market?
Oh my gosh.
So she text, so she texted me. I went downstairs. She still had the television on. And I was like, I think we're going to be okay.
Did she watch your hit live?
Oh, yeah. She was like, and remember, the other thing, and this is kind of taking people behind the scenes, I didn't have a return. So for people out there who don't do television, sometimes you do like I'm talking into this camera right now, I can't see what I look like. So I may look like an absolute abject moron, that's my fault. But I'm not seeing it, right? So I wasn't seeing Brooke or the other guy during our interview. I didn't have a return of the feed.
Yeah.
So I could just hear, and I was just talking into this camera like I am now. She had watched the whole thing. And I do think it plays differently. I think it's much funnier in person when you can see all of the facial reactions accompanying the audio. Remember, I'm just hearing the audio.
Exactly.
And so she's like, oh, this is going to be big.
Should I put the house on the market?
Should I put the house on the
That is a great line. I
market?
forgot, when I met Laura yesterday, I should have said that.
Yeah.
Hey, is your house on the market? Oh, you have 5 houses now. It doesn't matter. Life has been good.
But to your point, I do think it matters. So that turned into the monster story that it did. A lot of people wanted to fire me. The chief PR people at ESPN went to war to try to get me fired. They had all their sports media assets, everything else. I was a threat to them, and so they wanted me removed. People don't know this. On my radio show, remember I was doing Fox Sports Radio mornings for like a month, and I'm surprised it didn't turn into a story. Fox Sports wouldn't let Fox Sports Radio's logo be used on my radio show.
No way.
If you go back and you listen, September 2017, it's Outkick the Coverage with Clay Travis. There's no mention of me being a part of Fox Sports Radio.
No way.
Fox Sports pulled their name off my show.
Wow.
And to the credit of Julie Talbot, who is my boss now with the Clay and Buck Show, and Scott Shapiro and Don Martin, who are the Fox Sports Radio, well, Don just stepped down, but Don and Scott are still there. They have my back. And I hadn't been doing that show for very long, but I have complete loyalty to them. I'd been on for about a year with them, and they had my back. And the positive on that is, and you've learned this now, when you come through the cancel fires and they can't take you out, you are on the other side and they can't do anything to you. Charles Barkley is the first person, I think, who went through all the fires. Charles Barkley can say whatever the hell he wants on TNT, and they can't do anything to him. I think you can say whatever you want now. I can say whatever I want. That was their time.
It was.
If they could have taken me out then I would have. I don't think it would have been possible to completely take me out, but I think they could have put me in a difficult position financially. I wasn't rich then. You know, had a normal life, good job, but I didn't have like millions of dollars in the bank where I could sustain myself. And so that in and of itself, I think, was their failure. And now there's such a desperate craving for authenticity. A lot of people listen who may not agree with everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. And I think what you probably have seen is as well, even when people, I don't even get attacked that much anymore. It's like most people don't come after me. But what I found even when I got attacked was, it's the best advertising you can get. Because people think if they rip you, that everybody in their audience is going to agree with them. Sage, the number of people that come up to me and they say, either I didn't know you existed until so-and-so came after you, or I used to hate you.
Yes.
And then over time, I listened or I watched, and they started saying, you know what, this is the advantage, I think. This is why I'm ultimately an eternal optimist. I really think that I can convince anybody of anything if I can get them to watch or read or listen to the arguments that I make, because I think I'm right. And and I used to argue that I'm a little bit like, moss, I'll grow on you, right? Like
Yeah.
over time, you'll see when you stand for principle and you remain consistent, very few people do that. And so if you can, even if people disagree with you, they'll come and they'll listen. And there's probably, I guarantee you, people watching right now, like, I've never even heard of this guy. And that's why I'm happy to come on and talk with you. And so I was happy to have you on my show, because we had you on Clay and Buck.
Right after I left ESPN.
Right after. Yeah. Tons of people, I bet, because I saw it on social media, were like, oh my goodness, I never had heard of Sage Steele before. And they hear your story and they find it compelling and they find you and they follow you. And that's how you build change in society, one person at a time. They sit down and they say, you know what? I think he's right about this. And I think Trump is the bull in a china shop, to bring it back to Trump. He gets to the right results. He breaks a lot of things to get to the right result. And sometimes I think people look at the mess and not the conclusion. And I think there's an argument that J.D. Vance is like a cleaner Trump, because he doesn't break as much to get to the conclusion, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I think it's I think you're very deserving of a lot of credit, because even though you knew you were right the whole time about your opinions and the stances you took and timing and everything, like, it was a different time.
Yeah.
We all of a sudden are coming to, what is it, the golden age? What's the golden thing that we're all of a sudden in?
The golden age of America, or whatever his opening line was. Yeah, it was an amazing opening line to the inaugural address.
Everything he did in that inaugural address to me was pretty amazing, including taking shots at the people sitting over his left shoulder. It was just beautiful to watch. But no, you took chances.
Yeah.
A ton of chances when no one else was. And so to your point about authenticity and being consistent, that is you. You have never really wavered. Give me an example of one time where you're like, okay, went too far. Something you would have, you think you made a mistake.
Yeah, I don't know that I would change anything about what I've said. Here's what I worry about. I worry about my kids being judged good or ill based on things that I said or do. And that's the dad in me.
Yeah. That has happened to me so many times. That is one reason why it took me so long.
Yeah, I get it.
Speak up, because they feel, especially, how old are your boys?
16, 14, and 10.
Right. Like when I was going through all of it with the lawsuit, they were 13, 15, 17.
Yep.
They're now 18, 20, 22. They still get tight and nervous. I think it's a good reason to pause at times, but you're teaching them a lot by not stopping.
Yeah, look, what I said is, if you think something is true and you think something is right, you can't tiptoe up to it. And do your research. Make sure that you have your facts marshaled. I always say, and it's a good sports analogy, if I said to you, hey, I don't think Patrick Mahomes is going to win the Super Bowl, maybe 75% of people might agree that listen to that if they're sports fans. You could agree or disagree with it. But if I said to you, hey, I don't think Patrick Mahomes is going to win a Super Bowl because he's never proven he can win a big game and he hasn't done it yet. He's won 3 Super Bowls.
Yeah.
You could agree with my conclusion this year, because maybe you're a Bills or a Washington or a Philly fan when we're taping this. We'll see what happens this weekend. But you might agree with my conclusion, but you should trust me less. One of the things that I see happen a lot in society is people skip over the argument and they get to the conclusion and they'll defend anything. I think it's important to tie it all together and have my facts in a row before I get to my opinion. And so for my boys, what I've had to sit down with them and talk about is, you're going to get judged for good or ill, oftentimes, especially in your youth, based on whether people like or don't like me.
Yeah.
And
that's hard.
What I want you guys to be, and I tell my boys this all the time, and I hope they do it, is be super tight like a fist for the 3 of them. You can fight in the house, and they do. Trust me, they're boys. But understand that because of who you are and what your last name is, particularly where we live here, people are going to know you, and they're going to have some preconceptions about you because of me.
Because Dad.
But you have to be judged on your own innate talents, gifts, or whatever faults you have out there. And I just want you guys to be strong as a fist for the family, because understand that you're also going to get ripped. And look, I talked about social media. My boys roll their eyes when I talk about it. Be careful what you say. Be careful what you like. Be careful what songs you share, like in a way that I never had to think, because nobody cared what my parents did. Maybe there's a pretty girl that likes you that otherwise wouldn't because, they might have an idea what I do for a living.
Yeah.
But also there's a lot of people out there that are gunning for you, and you have to be so close. And I think that's good advice for every kid, but I hate that I have to have that conversation.
I know. And that just one of your opinions can affect, like I had to talk to coaches once.
Yep.
And administrators. And my daughter, she's a freshman at Ole Miss now, but her senior year of high school. I mean, this had been going on for years. And a teacher pulled her outside of the class and was like, "Are you okay?"
Yeah.
And she's like, "Yeah, I'm great. Why?" He's like, it was a guy. "No, are you okay? I mean, I saw that your mom said da 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 da. Are you okay?" In the middle of class, pulled her out.
Yeah.
When I heard that, Clay, it takes a lot for me. And I was like, "Wait, excuse me?" She said, "It's the second time he's done it in the middle of class." Like, there's certain things you don't do.
Yeah.
It's amazing, though, that I've had to tell my kids, here's your answer. Number one, you tell me if that happens. I'm going to take care of it in a different manner.
Yeah.
But number two, whether it's teachers, coaches, other kids' parents, friends, internet, where they come after my kids as well, like crazy-ass old dirty men saying they want to rape my daughters. Like,
it's insane
next
what people
level
have to deal with.
disgusting stuff.
Right.
Because of your mom's opinion, that's why many people, again, stay quiet. And I get it and I respect it because I did too. But I said to them, just say, my mom has a right to her opinion, just like you. Or I don't always agree with my mom, but that's her right.
Yeah.
And I hope that we all keep that right. Pretty much people
answer.
go silent.
Yeah.
So for the teenagers having to teach the adults in the room, I think there are benefits to this. Your boys are going to grow up and are growing up, with some great examples, because your wife is sharp as a tack and smart. Their dad is brilliant as well. And they're going to know that there is a cost to not being true to themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that, yes, there's tough stuff that comes for them because you're their dad. Life's also pretty good too, right?
There are some benefits. That's what I always say. It comes with, pluses and minuses. You get to meet some coaches and players, maybe a sports fan that
travel a little bit. The house is nice. You probably have, wait, how old is your oldest?
16.
Car?
I don't want to put him on blast. He's not a very good driver. He would acknowledge that. We have a car, used car, that he has access to, but even he is like, "Dad, I don't know that." He's got a lot of work to do to get to be a better driver, I think.
Okay.
But but
I have two out of three are horrid drivers.
Yeah.
Horrible, and that will never change. The oldest one in particular, she's 22.
Yeah.
So I get it. You're not putting him on blast. Hey, he's got some work to do. So does my girl Quinn. But in general, I do believe that we are showing them to be true to themselves.
Yeah.
For me, I hope that my kids don't wait as long as I did to have the courage to be true to themselves. Do it in a kind way. I'm not trying to take anybody out. I'm not cussing anybody out. That's not my MO. That's not what I do on social media or anything.
Yeah, right.
And I do hope that they're better than me in that way and don't live in fear for as long. And they have two parents in your household where sometimes I wish you had more fear. Like there's no fear with you, and I'm kidding because I don't at this point. But
no, look, I mean, I think that's so important, and this is something that I think is so significant. I understand why a lot of people have been and still are potentially afraid to speak out with what they actually believe. Because if you are a mom or dad out there and you've got a job where you're making $60,000 a year, and especially if you're a single parent, which a lot of people are, you've got to pay your mortgage.
Yep.
And you're trying to help your kids get into college. And you have to go sit through a HR seminar on how awful America is because you work at a big corporation and that's how HR training goes. I understand why those people are quiet, Sage. I really
do too. It's smarter. It's the right thing at that moment,
really
probably.
Do. Totally. The people that I get furious about are the Mark Cubans of the world, right? Who I think is, and I'm not trying to just pick on Mark Cuban, but the reason why I single him out is if you have, and I don't know what the X millions of dollars needs to be, but let's say if you have $20 million in the bank, right? Very few people have that, but let's say you do. Nobody can do anything to you.
Right.
You are economically uncancelable.
Right.
Those are the people that piss me off. Because if you are pretending to believe something that you do not, you are living a lie that you can afford not to live.
Yes.
people having to go through life without economic security, I get why they make the choices that they do.
I do too. And that's why it's up to us.
That's exactly why I feel a moral
yes.
obligation. You do too now. Like, I don't think I'm cancelable. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some people are going to come around. I'll lose my radio show. But I can always go on my Twitter account. I don't think they're going to take that away. Maybe, even if all that happened, my money, I don't have to work anymore. It's a great feeling. I want everybody to be in a position, I would love this economically, where you know what it's, everybody sits around and says, what would it be like to win the lottery? That's the entire reason the lottery exists, because everybody who buys a ticket
Great point.
gets to live that vicarious fascination of, what if they do call my number? I'm never going to have to work again, and I'm going to be rich, and I'm going to do all these things. That's great, and it's good to have that fantasy. You know what's better? To want to do the exact same thing that you're already doing if you won the lottery.
That is rare. That is beautiful.
Right?
And that's what you're doing.
And that's what I feel like I did. I won the lottery, and the day after I won the lottery, I woke up and I wanted to do the exact same thing that I was already doing.
You've created it, though.
Thankfully, we have had some successes and opportunities for that. But that, to me, is what I want every kid. That's what I want every person. Not only to, like, it's great if you win the lottery, right? Or it ends up making money. But if money is an end to allow you to do what you really want to do, that's fine. But you really know you're living life in a way that you can be profoundly happy, I think. And I think I'm a super happy guy, happy warrior, to the extent that's a phrase, because I don't have to do this. I just think it makes a difference. And it's great feeling to wake up the day after you sold your company and you've got life-changing money, and you don't have to work anymore. And you want to keep doing the same things that you were already doing. Like, that was amazing.
Are your parents alive?
My mom and dad are both still alive. They live a half mile away
Do they
from me.
really?
Oh yeah, my kids are around them all the time.
What a blessing.
It's amazing.
Let me ask you, if you knew it was coming, you knew the deal was pending, what did they say?
So my mom's probably going to watch this, and she's going to be like, I want to talk to Sage. I'll tell her exactly.
Yeah, the day that you found out, I don't know the dollar amount, it was a lot of money if he doesn't have to work again, that their little boy, because we always are, it doesn't matter how old we are, we're always our little kid, did it. Like, you got it done, and not just you, but your children are really set for life. I can't imagine as a parent.
So when we signed the papers in May of 2021, I was in bed, it was like 3 a.m. I turned to my wife and I was like, you, meaning my wife, who's going to live to be like 120 because she's way healthier than me.
She's so
I was like, you are going to be able to pay for every kid, grandkid, and great-grandkid to go to school wherever they want and study whatever they want for as long as they want to for the rest of your life.
Oh, my God.
And I said it to her because, again, she's going to live to be 120. I don't think I'm going to make it that long, Sage, because I go full speed and I don't tiptoe. And I feel like on some level that's probably not healthy, and I probably need to dial back more. But I just have so much drive that I want to get done every day.
What did she say?
She was, I think, remember, we met in law school when I was recruiting cute girls to play co-ed softball. So
always a businessman.
Yeah, but we had a really good-looking team, not particularly successful. I think she would acknowledge she's not that great with a bat in her hand or with a glove. But we've been married 20 years, and so I understand, like, some guys have success and then there's pretty girls and like you end up meeting girls, whatever. To her credit, I don't think people are looking at me like, whenever I've walked into a bar or restaurant, like, that's the best looking man I've ever seen. She liked me for me before we had anything. So when we got married, we had I had student loan debt. She had student loan debt. We lived in a small house for a long time. And so I appreciate the fact that she saw and wanted to build something with me, right?
Yeah.
But for my mom and dad, and this, my wife, my mom has believed that I am the greatest thing that's ever existed as all parents should, for my entire life. And so, I was a public school kid, but they put books in front of me, and whatever I was interested in, they super encouraged. Like, my rule in my house, I wish my boys read more, but it is, if you want to read a book, I'll buy it for you. You just have to read it. Right?
Yeah.
And back in the day, there wasn't Amazon, but if I wanted to go into Walden Books, my
Walden
parents
Books,
were
yeah.
state employees. I said, my mom and dad, neither one of them made $50,000 a year. And so my first year practicing law, I made more money than my parents had ever made together in their lives, right? Gosh. So my mom is still walking on air, like, not just about that, but what I do for a living. Within 5 minutes of meeting my mom, she is telling you about, not only me, I've got a sister, about the fact that, my sister has a PhD and teaches at Vanderbilt, and her son who does radio every day. And so the number of times, like, I'll stop by my parents' place on my way home after we do this today, probably, depending on what time we finish, and I'll walk in, and my mom will be like, so, my dad broke his hip recently, and so he's rehabbing, but she'll be like, the guy who's rehabbing your dad is a fan of yours. I'm like, what? How it comes up like,
Yes.
hey, my son is Clay Travis. And, so she has always said, and I think it's to her credit, my parents are a little bit old for the South when I was born. They were married 10 years before they had any kids.
Oh, wow. In the South,
So they were 34, which is somewhat rare. Mm-hmm. And so they are the best parents on the planet. I think they have lived much of the life that they wanted to live before they had kids.
Yes.
And as a result, for my sister and me, I feel like we had the best possible parents. And so I think whatever kids they had been gifted with would have had a lot of success because they just poured so much love, effort, and energy into us that it was hard for us not to flourish, if that makes sense.
Which is incredible. And at the same time, you took it to another level and took so many chances and risks. And now, what aren't you doing? We have obviously your Outkick stuff, which, can you re-explain? Like,
for people
you created Outkick.
Yeah. For people who don't know, if you're a sports-ish fan, because we do a lot of things now, but sports is the foundation. We are the anti-woke sports site on the internet. So we're like, hey, we believe in the meritocracy. We believe men and women are different and that men's sports should exist and women's sports should exist. And we also like to have fun. If that sounds appealing to you, Outkick was bought by Fox in 2021. We've grown massively since then. We have a lot of employees. And a lot of people that are working very hard to produce a lot of great original content.
Great content, yes.
So on a daily basis. So that exists. Then I do Clay and Buck. And by the way, I still manage and am involved very much, still write a lot at Outkick. Then I do Clay and Buck, which is noon to 3 Eastern. When Rush died, Buck and I took over for that show in June of 21. Then I do a lot of, because Fox bought Outkick, I now still do a lot of Fox News on a regular basis. And I still do some Fox Sports too, because I used to do a daily sports gambling show back in the day. I love sports. I mean, so I do all those things.
Big Noon Kickoff.
Still do Big Noon Kickoff.
Every Saturday during college football season. Every weekend are you on
Not
the road?
Not every weekend, 4, 5, 6 weekends a year. I have been on the road a couple of the past years every weekend. Just a lot to be on the road. But I love that. I love college football. And then I've written a couple of books and everything else. So, and my boys, importantly, are happy, healthy, and thriving so far as they can right now in their own sort of chosen pursuits, which is awesome.
Professionally, what else do you want? Do you
I don't know. It's a great question. To the extent that I had a role model in sports, it was Tony Kornheiser. Because I wanted, once I started writing and realized that I had some talent in radio, I wanted, like Tony Kornheiser, to be good, or Michael Wilbon, but particularly Kornheiser, in writing, radio, and TV.
Yeah.
They're 3 different disciplines.
Very different.
And I like the challenges. In fact, this studio that we're in right now, the very first time I ever did TV was in this studio, not in this particular studio. It was NBC Sports Network.
Oh, yeah.
They had me on back in the day for people. I think it was like 2012-ish.
Yes, that sounds right.
And I was sitting, and I noticed, I'll do it for the camera here. They just had me in a room, and I was so excited to be doing television. And I was talking, and you'll appreciate this because you know how to do television, and you're super supremely talented at it. I talked on television like I talk in real life. Like right now, I'm staring right at you, and if I just stare into your eyes the whole time, it's kind of weird, right? Like eventually, you're like, why is he looking at me? Like
you naturally glance
you look away.
Yeah.
I did television like I did a normal conversation. So I went back, because you have to learn each discipline. I went back and I watched, and what's funny is television, you get judged as less trustworthy for the thing in real life that actually makes you more trustworthy. In other words, if I'm staring into this camera right now and I'm like, hey, I'm Clay Travis, and you should watch, like if I'm looking away, people are like, that guy's shifty, that guy's shady, why is he not looking at me? Whereas when I'm looking at you right now, you're like, oh, I like this guy, maybe, I trust this guy, and I'm smiling and you're more, so the cosmetic elements of television, I had to learn. I never had any ability to learn it.
You can only learn it if you're doing it.
You have to do the reps.
You have to.
Writing I love because it's just me sitting in front of a blank computer screen. Nobody else is involved.
Gosh, but you're such a talented, I just think, you know this, it is so rare to have all of those skills.
So to answer your question, I don't know, because I feel like, to the point, like I feel like I won the lottery. My family is happy and healthy. I know I don't want to leave Nashville. You know, when I started Outkick back in 11, people said, oh, in order to succeed, you need to go to LA, you need to go to New York. Now Nashville is super hot as a media location. And now people are like, oh, I want to go to Nashville. Or, oh, you were so smart to move to Nashville and start the company. I'm like, no, this is where I lived, and this is what I wanted to do. I like challenges.
Your parents are here too, right next door,
Family is here.
So there's no, but that's the beauty. One of the few things good that came from COVID is that we realized we don't have to be in person to do everything, and now you've got the home studios. And so I love watching you because I look and I'm like, okay, what corner of his basement is that?
You need to come out to the house. You can come out for dinner at some point, because I know you're going to be in Nashville maybe a little bit more than in the past. But, you know, we have been in the same house for a decade. I now, thanks to my awesome wife, Laura, they have designed, a brand new home that we're building, which is going to have a really badass studio in it. So the one challenge about this now is it's very kind of ad hoc. So I've got radio and TV out of the house, but it breaks or something needs to get fixed, and people have to walk through the whole house. So you'll just be walking through, and my kids will be like running around in their underwear over the years, or they're fighting or being Jedis or whatever it is, or they're watching a movie, and then there's just random guy knocking on the door, walking up to the top of the house. So Laura, to her credit, and by the way, my wife may be walking out in a bathrobe. She doesn't know who's going to be in the house. So the new studio, which is going to be pretty awesome, will have a separate entrance. So you'll be able to pull up in a car, we'll have a green room, like you'll be able to walk through, so it will really look like a real studio. It's great what we have now. So I want to be able to do more. And the one thing I'll say is I love this. Sometimes I feel like a short order cook. Because you're constantly reacting to what happened in the last 24 hours. And you don't have all the time, the space to see what really matters.
Exactly. And you have to. You have to react pretty much immediately, or else it's old. I'm not good at that yet. I'm like, okay, let me think about it, and then let me make dinner, and then, because it does take me a little bit longer to formulate my thoughts, certainly compared to you, and so that's something I got to get better at, because it's an immediate thing. You are constantly on Twitter. You have to be to keep up with the news, and for the next 100 days of the first 100 days of Trump's presidency, every day there's going to be something crazy. Like, people better get ready to grind.
I mean, I took an Uber here to this point so I could sit and check on news and make sure I'm on top of things, because when you do a 3-hour daily show, you can think, hey, we're going to be talking about X, and then 20 minutes before you go on, Y happens, and you got to just toss out whatever thoughts you had about something. So I like this conversation. I like the idea, hopefully, like we're taping this in early 2025, but it's probably going to be up on YouTube, and in 2028, somebody might find this, and I hope it's evergreen and people can enjoy it 3 years later as much as they might today. I would like to make, I guess, a long way of saying, more durable, lasting content.
Okay.
That's what's great about a book. Like, you're trying to write not only for the moment, but for the future. And so if there's a way to do more durable, lasting content in the future, whatever that might look like, that has appeal to me.
And you're also providing for a lot of people. You have, with the creation of Outkick, and then that
we've got a lot of people's mortgage getting paid, a lot of kids' tuitions getting paid because of it. Yes.
Like, that's my dream, to be honest with you, is to be able to provide not just for myself and my kids and hopefully my parents, whatever, but for others. Because it goes back to speaking up too, and not being afraid to fall on your face. Because you're going to. and get back up and wait. They canceled me, but I'm still here.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? Just like business, you keep trying, and along the way, when you achieve that goal, you're showing others to
that is
try. Yeah, like I don't know that, I hope that you can do that for yourself every once in a while, and like I know you don't have many quiet moments, like because you have to like schedule them in, but it's a big deal.
What I hope is, in addition to my kids, who's my obviously number one priority, I hope so I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, right? I mentioned Walden Books. I didn't know anybody who wrote a book. And I'm a big believer in the idea of possibility and understanding what you are capable of, and it being something more than what your parents have done or your grandparents have done. And you probably experience this now, I bet, a lot. There's a lot of people who are what I would call the aristocracy. They're like, oh, my great-grandpa did X or Y, and they try to use that as a justification for why they matter.
Yeah.
I want my kids to be in the meritocracy. Judge me on what I did. To me, that's America. That's why we left England, because just because your great-great-great-grandfather was the Earl,
yeah,
it doesn't have anything to do with whether you are worthy of success or not. And so I hope there are kids out there all over the country that watch something like this, or maybe see something that I have done and think, oh, if Clay Travis could do that, then I can do it too. Because I'm a kid who grew up in Nashville with no media background or anything else. I didn't know, how to write a book or do a TV show or any of that stuff. You can do it, right? That's one thing I've seen Stephen A. say. Like, I couldn't have been Shaq. Right?
Yeah.
Like I couldn't have been Michael Jordan. Like I could bust my ass to play basketball. I love it, or football or anything else. But you are going to be the height that you're going to be. You are going to be the weight that you're going to be. We don't choose our bodies. And so, but you can choose to develop your mind and create things in ways that you aren't circumscribed necessarily. Does that make sense?
To develop your mind. Yes. What a process, though. Like, what a process. And even now, and I know we're going to get going here and let you get home to your wifey and kids, but even now, like I'm having to retrain
totally.
my little brain from 30 years of network TV, where you've got a team of 40, 50 to get a Sports Center on the air. And I did 2 live hours every day and the highlights and that. Like it was a grind.
That's right.
But you had a team.
Yep.
When you come over here and try this, you're on your own. You can hire a team, which is great, but like at the end of the day, this is on you.
That's right.
I think it's hard. It's hard. And I'm not afraid.
Yeah.
But it's just trying to retrain your brain to think differently, to approach things differently as a boss of myself, nobody else at this point.
Yeah, right.
I've always just been an employee.
Yeah, that's right. That's to your point. You either think like a boss or you think like an employee.
Yeah. But there is hope to change.
There is, and you can develop, right? For me, one reason I started Outkick was I didn't want anybody else to control my family's ability to eat. I wanted that on my shoulders.
So was this always your goal? Start this, build it, and sell it?
No, I never would have ever, this is why the adjacent possible to me is so interesting. I got fired in 2011 along with everybody that worked at Fan House.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And there were like 100, I don't know, some odd people. And I loved that job. And one day I just woke up. I actually turned my phone off. I was on a panel to talk about the future of media. And our business got sold. And I didn't have a job. And I've been busting my ass, and I've been building, and I've been building and building. And I had a 3-year-old, this is 2011 when I started Outkick, 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and a wife, and a mortgage. And I was making $40,000 a year. And so that's stress. That's real. That's real. Hey, am I going to be able to cut a check or not? And so the reason I started Outkick and took that risk was because I wanted to control. I felt confident about my talents.
Yeah.
And that was from a writing perspective. I was doing radio at the time, which is where my salary was, daily, local, sports talk radio here. That's the other thing I would say. It's easier to take risk when you have multiple streams of income. And sometimes when you have success, it actually is golden handcuffs, as you have experienced. because the more success you have, the less risk oftentimes you're willing to take, because you're like, why would I say something? I'm making X, why would I leave that job? I'm making X, even if it's not the right fit.
Yes.
And so I was somewhat fortunate in that respect, in that I wasn't making enough money. I remember thinking, if I totally fail with Outkick and I bomb, it's not like I've taken out $1 million loan and my business failed. My family's still going to be able to eat. I can go back to practicing law in some way.
You have options.
I have options.
Yeah.
But I wanted to control my future. And that's why I started Outkick back in 2011. But I didn't know at that time, remember, I started writing. I didn't know I was good at radio. The only reason I found out I was pretty good at radio was because I would go on as a radio guest to talk about the articles that I was writing.
Yeah, that's right.
So for like 15 minutes at a time as a radio guest, people were like, hey, you're pretty good at this. And then the only reason I found out that I was okay at TV was because, one, I learned the lessons, like I just talked about the first time I ever did this here 11 years ago, how to be good on TV, but also because I found writing to be the foundation of all argument.
Yeah.
And so I make arguments on radio, I make arguments on TV, and that is the unifying force across all of them.
But it's very, very different. There are many people who are good at radio, but they see a camera pointing at them and start to think about how many people are potentially watching when you're on with Jesse Waters or something.
I talk about that when I first started at Fox Sports. They have what they call the avocado room out in LA, the green room. They call it the avocado room.
Okay. That's funny.
The number, it's very, very Fox. The number of athletes and talent that will sit in that green room with games on, big bank of televisions, and be amazing. You walk 100 yards, lights, cameras, everything. That red light is on, pointing right at you.
Yeah.
And they freeze up, and they're 1/10 or 1/20th as comfortable on camera. You've seen this happen. I bet a ton.
I'm literally envisioning a couple of moments where I even froze up. Yeah, I forgot what I was going to say.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's like, deer in headlights. That happens more than once. You're not getting asked back.
And
I'm getting fired.
Especially now in this era, they clip it, it goes viral, people call you a moron, all those things. People don't understand how easy that is to happen. And so to your point, like asking the question, no. To me, all I ever wanted was enough financial independence that I didn't have to worry about my family being taken care of. I didn't expect to end up with what I have. And I think if you love what you do, then you don't have to worry as much about the end result, because your overall performance will be so good because you're not trying to get out of doing what you do. Like when I practiced law, I didn't love it. Some people did. If you love what you do, then you're more likely to continue to work at it because you're not thinking about the clock in your head to when you get to do what you're also going to do.
Get to. And I think that's
I talk to my boys all the time. I love that. I say, get to. You get to do things. You don't have to do them.
Yes.
That changes a lot. I tell my boys, they roll their eyes. When we drop off, I tell them I want them to do 2 things every day at school. Dominate and have fun.
Which order?
No one's ever asked me that question. I think have fun, because you can't dominate if you're not having fun.
Yes.
But I wouldn't want only one, because only one, you're the rich kid who just allows yourself to be sucked into the lifestyle of hedonism, basically, right? Where all you do is just have an amazing time.
Yeah.
And at some point that leads to, I think, destructive life behavior. Same time, I don't think you can just focus on dominating, because then you're the person that may well have success, but you're miserable.
Yes.
And you're making the people around you miserable.
Have we seen?
So many people in our industry focus on the domination without the fun, and they destroy themselves and everyone around them.
And everyone around them, because when you are that face on TV, you are there, you're representing them, the entire team.
That's right.
And so many are so negative and ugly and, borderline evil off camera.
Yes.
And that's the worst part. It's the whole thing about don't meet your favorite athlete, and the people that I met and had to work with, I'm so sad.
Well, and also 100%, like how many times do we see that being some form of toxicity, right? So I think you have to have both.
You do.
And so that's why, again, I try to distill things. That's why I tell my boys every day, and they roll their eyes, but they'll say it. I'll say, hey, what are you going to do today? dominate and have fun, Dad. I mean,
Yes,
that's what they
yeah.
say.
Yeah,
And I think it's good advice in general because I want them to aspire to dominate some field, but you have to pair it with fun or else ultimately there isn't a sustainability to it.
Clay, that's what you. I mean, I'm not being cheesy. You know, I've admired you from afar for
And
so
by the
long.
way, this is a mutual admiration society. We had
well,
not met in person
until
the inaugural ball. When I was
inaugural
standing
ball.
doing Fox Nation, I looked down. I'm like, oh, that's Sage.
I'm like, oh my
yeah,
God,
yeah.
hi,
So,
finally.
and then we were on the same Southwest flight. The other funny thing is people pick on me about the Southwest.
It's the best. Plus in Nashville,
Nashville, Southwest goes everywhere.
Yeah.
But even my wife is like, why are you still flying? Like, I don't want, I'm very happy with who I am. And so I've flown Southwest my whole life. I have, probably will continue. I don't have to, right? I can afford to not. But I'm always going to be the guy who's looking at the prices of food on menus.
Yes.
And if I think, hey, it's going to cost me $30,000 to fly private somewhere, or I can fly on Southwest for $500, I'm going to fly Southwest.
Basic math.
Yeah, and now sometimes like there are
Depends.
places you can't get to, or events you like whatever. It's
have
nice to have that
options.
luxury.
Yes.
But I flew up and back on Southwest Airlines for the inauguration.
But I love that. And
Yeah.
I actually think, and by the way, I still cut coupons for CVS
So
in
does-
particular. And then the other day I was like, I'm not buying this face wash because I have a $5 coupon. My mother's like, really?
Yeah.
Stop, Sage, you can do it,
Yeah.
you can do it. But I think that this is the part of Clay Travis that most people don't know, don't
Yeah.
want to see, and you have fun with it. You're like, I can do, it's hysterical because you make it very clear that you don't have to be doing any of this. You want to be doing it.
Yeah.
But I love that, and that just goes back to some basic stuff. You're a businessman
Yeah.
who has chosen to do it this way, who could have stayed practicing law
Yep.
and done really well financially and been
Probably
able to
would have been a trial attorney if I had stayed, because the way I think about it, Sage, is all I'm doing is basically talking to a big jury every day. And I'm trying to persuade the jury that I'm right.
Yeah.
The jury can be 12 people in a personal injury case in Nashville, Tennessee courtroom where I ended up as a trial attorney. Or it could be 1 million people listening on the radio or on Fox News every night or whatever it is, or reading an article. It's the same thing, right? I've got to convince people, here are the sets of facts, why does it matter, and what's significant about it. That to me is what I do every day.
I wish I had a portion of your brain.
Well, here's some things that I don't do well. I'm not great at math. There are people who can look at a spreadsheet and they can make it, it's like it speaks the language. It's sometimes like hieroglyphics to me. My point on this is, find the things that you do well, and we all have some sort of innate talent. And hopefully if you have kids, expose them to a wide variety of things, because you don't know whether they're going to be incredibly, I'm tone deaf. I'll give you a funny story. I went to high school just down the street from where we are right now. I was in chorus. Our choral teacher came up to me. I was a bass. I've got a loud voice, but I don't do tone well. And the choral teacher, a longtime guy, stops in front of me, and he says, somebody's off pitch, like they're totally, it's like discordant, like he's got perfect pitch. Stops in front of me and he says, Mr. Travis? I said, yes, sir. He said, you're going to be in charge of announcing the songs now. You have a beautiful voice, but you cannot sing on tone or in tune.
You're the
at all.
announcer.
I'm not kidding. In high school chorus, I would walk out, and then he said, and then you'll go back and I want you to mouth the words.
No
I don't
way.
want you to actually sing. And so I would walk out and I would say, like, we're going to sing. This is Left Every Voice and Sing by whatever. I was at Martin Luther King Magnet High School just up the street. James Scander was our teacher. And in chorus, to get the choral credit, I would walk up. He said, boom, beautiful voice. You're really good at announcing what we're going to sing. And then you mouth it. So
That's kind of like, you were like kind of virtue signaling back then a little bit. I mean, just flat out faking it.
But there's lots of things that, my point is, like, whatever
Yeah.
gift you have, it's going to be accompanied by things that you're awful at. Find the things that you're good at, study them more, develop those skills, and over time, if you work pretty well, then that adds up. And I think a lot of people are looking, from a writing perspective, I know for sure, they want the instant gratification.
Yeah.
And really, it's the showing up and doing the work without kick. Every single day, I had to show up and be pretty good. I'm not saying I'm going to be great, but show up every day and be pretty good.
Yeah.
And if you're stacked together a lot of pretty goods in life, you're going to end up with a really good result, I think.
And to be okay, yes, falling on your face, but also not being okay, not being liked.
That's so important.
That's a tough thing. It took me way too many decades to learn it. But I think if you want to be successful in this, and even if you're not on TV, but a CEO of a company, you're not always going to be liked. Social media is pretty bad. You got to be ready, and you could spend your entire day responding. And I used to, not my entire day, but when I had moments in between 3 babies and hosting a live national TV show, like, no, this is what I actually said. Well, this is what I meant to say. Or I'm sorry. Or no, you're wrong. I said it 10 times. You cannot do that. It will take over. And I was talking about this earlier with Tommy Lahren. Like, you don't even pay attention to the good comments.
That's right.
You almost go digging for the negative when you're trying to prove to the world something, and that's not healthy. And you're really good at that.
So my wife says that is a weird thing that I have. If 10 people say something negative to me, it vanishes. Like I'm like an NFL defensive back that has just gotten burned deep 2 consecutive plays and lines up the next time and is going to talk trash. Like I remember the nice things and I missed, like the negatives just go right past, and I'm not a grudge guy. Like I don't keep it on my shoulders. My wife says that that's rare. And also radio is great for that, because she's like, you sit down for 3 hours, say everything you think. It's like a public therapy session. I've never done therapy. More power if it works for whatever works for you, figure it out. But because I say exactly what I think, I don't walk around with a lot of weight on my shoulders. And so when people come after me on a negative nature, it doesn't register, it doesn't pop with me. And my wife's like, most people would die with the amount of negativity that you have been through in your life.
Gosh.
I think it's just that I've gotten used to the poison, or that I have like immunity to it. It doesn't register with me. I'll give you a metaphor here. My grandfather, my mom's dad, who played football at University of Tennessee, which I'm a UT fan, he got honey. Like he was a gardener, loved all that stuff. And he said, I always found the phrase really interesting. Like when he would pull the honey out, he didn't always wear a full bee suit. And he would get stung sometime. But the bees can kind of almost sense like how nervous you are as you're moving around.
They can feel it.
Yeah, that's what he told me. I'm not a beekeeper, but there's a beekeeper expert who's watching this right now. It's like, you're totally wrong. But he would say, he would get stung every now and then. But he said he didn't have any result, any reaction. I said, why do you think that was? He said, I have immunity to bee stings. Like it was like he had been stung enough times that it didn't impact him.
Yeah.
And I love that metaphor, because I think in a social media age, everybody's getting stung by bees all the time.
Oh my gosh.
If you can develop immunity to it so that your body is not reacting to the negativity, then ultimately you have the power over the people that are trying to hurt you. Does that make sense?
It totally does.
I want my kids to have it. It's so weird to live in an era where, like, I've got my phone, where suddenly tons of people you don't know, that you will never see face to face, that you will have no interaction to, are judging you positive or negative all day long, every day.
Yes.
And we're reacting in some way as a society and allowing that judgment to impact our sense of self-worth.
Yes.
It's fake. And it's also profoundly anti-human, because for most of our lives, all that mattered to a large extent was how people in small communities or villages judged us and our family on face-to-face interaction and real behavior.
Based on real behavior, yes. Not this. No. And that's the poison of where we are.
That's right.
And with our kids and everything else. I'm going to use that with the bees, because I got a lot of stings.
And you got a lot of stings. I hope, by the way, I don't want everybody to get my girled here, right? I don't want the, spoiler alert, I don't want the kid who gets stung by the bees. Like, what he had told me was that was true. And I love it now. It was for a long time before social media would have existed. But I think about it sometimes in the social media age, that if you allow yourself to be impacted by everybody who's reacting to you, you will be toxic. and your own feelings will be toxic. I think I'm a little bit unique and maybe a little bit fortunate, and maybe it's a weird sort of social thing that I have, that I'm such an optimistic person that I don't let people get to me. And
It's huge.
another one little bit on this is, I don't know who said it first. Two things that I think are profound. One is Charles Barkley. I mentioned him earlier. I was out to dinner with him. This is years and years ago. He said, if you worry about the opinions of people who don't like you, then eventually the people who do like you won't like you
Aren't
anymore.
gonna like you.
Super important.
Yep.
Second part on this, only take criticism from people you would ask for advice.
Yes, that one.
I love those two.
It's so true.
I love those two. Why would I take criticism from, and by the way, I would say this for anybody out there, one of the things that frustrated me about ESPN was, if you end up president of ESPN, you've had to make a lot of good decisions. Why do you care what external people say about your decisions?
Yeah, yeah.
Trust your own instincts. Why would you
Your gut.
allow your opinions to be influenced by a lot of people way less successful than you who haven't made good decisions to get to this point? I think there's a lot of fear, and to the extent that you mentioned that you talked to Tommy, what I like about Tommy and what I like about people more and more as I get older is I am super impressed by fearlessness.
Yes.
Not only physical, like I'm not particularly, like I'm a very fearful person. I'm not gonna skydive, like there are lots of things.
Yeah.
But mentally, I am fearless, right? When I know believe I'm right, I'm gonna power through. We need more fearlessness in America. And I think that ties in with COVID. This whole idea, like I don't fear death. There's no one who has conquered death by and large. To my knowledge, no one alive today that's immortal, right? We're all going to end up the same place,
Yeah.
right? What we do while we're here is what impresses me. If tomorrow I walked out, or today when we finish the show, I walked out and I got in a car accident or something, I don't want to. Like, I'd like to live to be 100 and, see my kids and great grandkids, all that stuff. But I would feel like the life that I've lived to this point, I've done everything that I wanted to.
Wow.
And so I want to squeeze everything out while I can.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be one of those people who's bitter when they're 65 or 75 or whatever, laying around and thinking, boy, I really wish I would have done X or Y. I don't want to have regrets. I don't want to have any.
I hope you don't. And in the meantime, I know you're not going to change. I know you're not.
I'm not.
No, well, that's too late. But in general, because you're doing exactly what you want to do. Hopefully you get that feedback enough. Sounds like you do. And obviously from a business perspective. But I just need you to know, like, thank you. And I think there's a lot of people out there who feel the same way, because you didn't have to do this. You didn't have to keep going.
Let me give one bit of advice to everybody out there, because I think this is important. When you have success, there's lots of people to tell you nice things. It's not people who have success that need you to tell them nice things. It's people who haven't had a lot of success lately, or people who are trying something new. I ended one of my books, Republicans Buy Sneakers, by saying something that's really true. The people who need support are not the people having success. It's the people trying something new.
Yes.
It's the people that don't have, because this social media era we live in, it's so toxic. You all in your lives have somebody. Maybe they just opened a new business. Maybe they just had a baby. Maybe they just got a puppy. Things that are new and challenging, whatever they may be. Maybe they're just going off to school. Maybe they're taking an AP course, whatever it is. Tell people that you're impressed by something that they do that otherwise might not be hearing positive feedback.
Yeah, let them feel seen.
I mentioned this in my book. I have an uncle who said, when I was first starting to write online, hey, I think one day you can make a living doing this. Now I was still practicing law. I wasn't making any money off writing. But the positive feedback that you get before success is way more valuable than the positive feedback. Everybody wants to congratulate winners. Like, it's easy to be the guy who just won the tennis tournament and they're like, hey, you just won the Australian Open. It's going on right now, whatever else. It's good to celebrate success. But it's way more impactful, I think, to find people who have not had a high level of success yet and be that voice of inspiration and support. And we can all do that in our life, whatever it is. And I think if we all did it a little bit more, the end result is actually
Yeah.
far better wherever someone is going to be headed.
No, I agree. And I think that's why back before you sold the company, and
Yeah, that's
when
why
you
you
first
reaching
kinda
out
came
was
out,
yeah.
I know what it's like to not receive it.
Yep.
And to not be believed in. And to not have people say honest things to me either.
Yep.
Like, it's easy, it's much easier. And I'll end on this because I think it's something you'd appreciate. My dad, when I was growing up, had required my brothers, I'm the oldest of three, I have two younger
Yep.
brothers, required the three of us to memorize part of the cadet prayer at West Point. And this part, you can take it as a prayer or not, but I think it's just smart and prophetic right now. Help us to choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong, and never to be content with a half-truth when the whole can be won. I've used that throughout my life in every aspect. At ESPN, do I sue Disney? Do I stay quiet, stay safe, keep getting the money? With a marriage that ended, when I was really in a rush on the way to get here, coming out of Target with a cart, and I wanted to shove the cart up on the curb. Put the cart back. It's the harder right.
Yeah.
It's the harder right to have a tough conversation with somebody. It's the harder right to be honest about where you are personally, and are you public and vulnerable about it? It's easier to just stay safe in every aspect. And then once you know the truth, like that second part, the never to be content with the half truth when the whole can be won, politically all these things, right?
Yeah.
Like once you know the truth, like I can't unsee it or unhear it. And you're a sellout. That's when you're not being genuine and real, even though telling the truth really can be scary, you know? So that's what you've done. And my mom sends me your stuff all the time. I'm like, Mom, I already saw it, you know? My mom is 75 years old. And look, I punched a hole through my sock. At least my
that's
toes
great.
are pedicure still from the inauguration. Thank you for being you. And just unapologetic all these years and being a great example to everybody, but especially those boys.
Well, you guys, first of all, that's incredible. You guys all know this because you're watching to a large extent because you love her. We need way more Sage Steeles in the world. And by the way, your mom has great taste.
Oh, I agree with that. See, let's bring it full circle with Clay ending like
Yes.
only Clay does. Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
the best.
It was
Thank
awesome.
You can keep the socks. I
Oh,
don't want
this
them
is
back.
amazing. Well, I'll take them back.
I don't want them back.
I don't want them back. Well, I did. Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.